Okay, let's get started. Hello, Friday. It's Friday. It's cold outside for many of us. And the one ray of hope as we live through this darkest part of winter is I just discovered that 3 weeks and one day from today, we change our clocks and we spring forward. And that means an extra hour of sunshine. An extra hour of sunshine in the evening. How awesome is that? Just 3 more weeks and we get to spring forward. So let's look on the bright side as we try to stay warm and move through the cold and the snow and the difficulties that may drop on top of us. Today, we're going to do chapter 3 of Stinking Thinking. Chapter 3 of Stinking Thinking. Chapter 1 was about the power of words. Chapter 2, we talked about rebooting and reframing and how those were very powerful strategic tools that you could use to develop new, more positive brain maps and eliminate or minimize stinking thinking. Today, we're going to talk about chapter 3. Chapter 3 is all about overcoming bias in our lives. So bias, we all have it, and it really does contribute to stinking thinking. And we'll talk about why that happens, why our brains drive that, and what we can possibly do about it to eliminate the stinking thinking part of it. Remember, Neuro-Fitness Fridays are about developing not stinking thinking, but winning thinking. Winning thinking gives us a more greater chance to make the right decisions and be more productive. Research says that we're 3 times more productive when we're in a positive mindset. And when we're in a negative mindset, we make poor decisions. Remember, last week I talked about those doctors who were in a negative mindset that made the wrong diagnosis 40% of the time. So we need to put ourselves in a positive mindset to make good decisions, to be more productive, and to reduce our stress. Right? That's what Neuro-Fitness Fridays are all about. If you have a brain, you're biased. Okay. People often say, I'm not biased. I don't have any biases. There's many, many kinds of biases. And if you have a brain, you're biased. You're biased because of your brain maps. You're biased because of your brain maps. Either the bias is leaning into those millions of years of evolutionary baggage, where your brain just wants to protect you and defend you and keep you safe and recoil and keep you from really exploring and reaching out. Let's just stay in our own little safe space. That contributes to many of our biases. Another contributor to our biases is our lifetime experiences. Let's say we have a bad experience about something. We create a brain map and we say, I don't like that. Last time I did that, this happened. Say, for example, you went to a sushi restaurant and you didn't have a good experience. And you go, I don't like sushi. You would have a bias against sushi. Now, it doesn't mean that that's a harmful bias, but some biases that we do have are harmful. Like the bias that says boys should be doctors and girls should be nurses. That's a harmful bias that many generations grew up with. And that bias has created the glass ceiling that women are forced to face each and every day in the workforce. Right? When our biases impact our decision making and impact our lives and impact others because of our judgments, then they become harmful. Here's a cartoon that I found to be incredibly, incredibly relevant. The world would be a much better place if everybody just thought the same way I do. That's the root cause of most of every one of our biases. We tend to feel that we want to surround people that are like us. We want to surround ourselves with people that think like us, act like us. And those type of things affect many things, not only in our personal lives, but in the workforce. They affect group formation. They affect hiring practices. They affect um, lots of decisions that happen only because we try to lean into the similar and the familiar as opposed to the things that are maybe more promote more diversity, when that's more diversity is the best answer. We make snap judgments. We make snap judgments all the time without examining options. You know, we tend to judge people based on their actions, their behaviors. I once worked at a company that there was a senior executive who, when he took a candidate that was being interviewed for a job and he took them to dinner, if that candidate salted their food before tasting it, he automatically rejected hiring them, him or her, just because they chose to salt. They had the habit of salting their food before they tasted it. It just is. It could have been. They could have been the best candidate for the job, but this gentleman had a bias that people who salt their food before tasting it aren't open to new experiences. That's the crazy judgment and bias that he had. And he probably eliminated many qualified candidates because he had that bias. Bias, as I said, impacts group formation, it impacts hiring, it impacts and limits our ability to listen to others because we tend to choose, we only want to filter out and listen to the things and the points of view that support our point of view, not other points of view. We have a recency bias. Recency bias is it says whatever just happened recently will either happen again or we'll go the other way. We have confirmation biases. We like to be right. When we're right, the dopamine hits us and we get a positive hit of dopamine. We like to be right. It feels good to be right. That aids to our confirmation bias. We have an availability bias. We tend to only look at the facts and the things that are available to us, or the first thing we hear, or the thing that has a gut feel or a strong feel about it. The world, yes, would be a better place if everybody thought the way we do. We have biases and we judge people that don't dress like us, don't talk like us, don't go to the same school as we did, don't drive the same kind of vehicle that we did, are just different. And, it makes us recoil, it makes us protect and defend ourselves. And we start judging others. And that contributes to our stinking thinking. At best, it makes us uncomfortable. At worst, it makes us angry, makes us downright angry. And then we have to ask the question, who are we hurting because of the stinking thinking and judgments? The reality, we're just only hurting ourselves. Let me give you a little example. A few years ago, I used to have a really strong visceral reaction when I went into, like, let's say, a coffee shop and I saw the person behind the counter and they had multiple tattoos in places that people don't ordinarily tattoo, like maybe their neck or all up and down their arm. Or let's say they had a piercing in places that people don't usually pierce their bodies. I was very familiar with pierce your ears, but your nose, your eyebrow, oh, it made me uncomfortable. I looked at this individual and I judged them. And I'd say, what's wrong with them? And then I became uncomfortable that why are they giving me the coffee? And it just made me filled with stinking thinking. And then I realized, who am I hurting? They don't really aren't affected by my judgments of them. I'm only hurting myself. I'm only hurting myself because I'm thinking this way. I'm only hurting myself. The stinking thinking is creating discomfort, it's creating distress, and it's adding to my stress level. It's keeping me from positive winning thinking. A real simple test to ask yourself is if you quickly get to that snap judgment and you say, "What's wrong with them? What's wrong with them?" The answer is there's probably nothing wrong with them. In their mind, they're feeling very content with who they are, and they're content with what they're doing. But we're judging that and saying what's wrong with them. A lot of people may have that same reaction. People that go to Harvard would have a visceral reaction for saying they judge people and say, if you went to Yale, you're not as good as people that went to Harvard. You could have a rivalry school that you feel the exact same way about. You may have that same feeling about people that live in a different state or whatever it is. We had in the summer there was lots of marches about a Black Lives Matter, and in the town I live in, there were people that were very, very strongly supportive of the police, and there were very people that were very strongly supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement. And people started printing up and putting signs in their yard. And one person put both signs in their yard. And they actually, the local TV news went and interviewed these people. And they said, how can you be both for Black Lives Matter and supporting the police? It's like, why not? I could support the police and I could also support this. Why do I have to choose sides? Why do I have to pick a side and judge the other side that they're wrong because my side is right? So if your stinking thinking starts creeping in and asking you the question, what's wrong with them? Check yourself, because that's the start of a problem. Let's move on to some strategies and some things you can do to overcome your biases. First thing you do is you need to raise your self awareness. We often see our biases in other people, but not in ourselves. And just as I said, everybody has bias. Everybody has bias. We we have to say and recognize, is my thinking right now due to a bias? Is my decision or snap judgment due to a bias? Is my feeling due to a bias? And is that feeling or judgment helping me or contributing to more stinking thinking? The reality of the situation is it's probably only hurting you. The second thing you can do, avoid assumptions and judgments. I gave you another little story. Last week, I saw a large pickup truck, um, raised bed, big tires, and a gentleman came in, young gentleman, very healthy, and he parked in a handicapped parking space. You know what happened? I immediately judged him. And said, what a jerk. That guy's not handicapped. Why in the world is he parking there? And that's blah, 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 blah. As I walked towards the store, I saw an elderly woman near the curb exiting out of the store. This gentleman walked over, grabbed her by the arm, and led her to the car. It was probably his mother or grandmother or aunt or somebody. He was doing them a favor. But I judged him as an evil person who takes up a handicapped parking spot in a big truck and he's not like me. And for those 2 minutes, that judgment created lots of anger and lots of stress and lots of discomfort in my life. Don't make any assumptions or any judgments. Number three, separate the person from the behavior. If you think about what they tell people in 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, they'll always say, you are a good person. Your behavior was bad. You are a good person. Drinking to excess is bad. Now, you have to separate the person from the behavior. So if you see a person behaving badly, don't judge the person. You could just separate the person from their behavior. That will help you minimize your stinking thinking. And lastly, the last thing you can do is you can lean in. You can lean into your bias. For me, my example of the person behind the counter at the coffee shop who had maybe lime green hair, nose piercing, and extra tattoos, rather than being uncomfortable about it, I would lean into it and I would say something like, "Wow, I like your hair," and "I like your tattoos," or something. Just lean into it. Express some positivity about it, even if it's not genuine at first. You can go in and just make a compliment. It will start catching yourself, improving your self awareness, and reducing your opportunity for judgment and for discomfort and potentially anger. So, if I could just leave you with one final thought on this, it's this. Our brains often see differences as threats. So check yourself. Don't see a difference in a person as a threat. Just tell yourself different is just different. Well, that's it. So we talked about words, we talked about reframing and rebooting, and now we've just talked about bias. Next week, we're going to talk about another really powerful topic. And in the Stinking Thinking, chapter 4, we're going to talk about how do you, when you really have a struggle and really struggle to find that reframe or find that word or really get yourself out of the downward spiral of stinking thinking, what are some strategies you can do? So now I'd like to ask you, in this whole notion of bias, I'd ask you to please contribute to the little chat box. What are some, what maybe seemingly harmless biases that you might have that you want to raise your self-awareness to, whether it's I didn't like people at a different school, or that don't dress like me, or whatever. People want to contribute that and write it down and put it in the chat box because that will help you. So let's see, what do we have here? Anyone want to contribute and come up with a bias that they may have? Let's say, for example, while you're thinking of the biases and contributing into the chat box, I'll give you another little small example. Let's say you're interviewing somebody for a job, and they show up on a Zoom interview and they're wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Do you immediately judge them and say, who in the world would wear a Hawaiian shirt to an interview? And then immediately, like that person I talked about with the salt, immediately say, I'm not going to hire this person, this individual. Or do you take a step back and you ask the question, hey, what made you wear that shirt, choose to wear that shirt today? Tell me about that choice. Maybe they had a really special reason. Maybe they had an emergency. Maybe something else happened, but you don't have to decide that for them. Give them an opportunity to explain themselves. they just may be the best candidate for that job. So it could be as simple as a bias like that. I judge people that don't show up like I do, don't dress like I do, don't talk like I do, don't conform to the same standards I do. I judge them. And you know what? It only hurts you, not them. It hurts you in the short term because of stinking thinking, and it may hurt you in the long term because you're missing an opportunity too. People who don't wear a mask in public places are sorry. Okay, yes, they're sorry people. Um, and that's probably another very good example of things going around these days. People that wear masks, people that don't wear a mask, people that, and that's another very divisive thing. Again, separate the person from the behavior, you know, their behavior. I judge the fact that they're not wearing a mask, that behavior is completely unacceptable to me. It doesn't make them, I'm not going to judge them to be a bad person. I'm going to separate that and at least um, move forward and not let the fact that their choice and their behavior is going to affect me. I'll just steer clear of them. So hopefully these 3 chapters on avoiding stinking thinking have been helpful to you. Look forward to chapter 4, the conclusion of our series next week, and then we'll move on to a different topic for the month of March. So thank you all for coming. I encourage you to continue to share the link for the signing up for the sessions. Tell people about it. Get as many people signed up as we can. The more people we can grow the community, the more everyone will benefit from it. With that, I'd like to say hello, Friday. Goodbye, stinking thinking. I know I'm biased, but I'm not going to let it bother me and affect my life. Have a great weekend. Remember, only 3 weeks in a day till spring forward. God bless you all.